Thank you, Gordon.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. We are having people join and filter in from the waiting room. So please give us a minute or two if people are filtering in. But once again, thanks very much for joining us. My name is Gordon Angus. I'm the Executive Director of the South African Engineers and Founders Association. When I was looking at the attendance register, I'm pretty sure I've met everybody that's going to be on the call today. So, but if not, I'm those of you who don't know me or perhaps haven't seen my face, that's who I am. And it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker for today's webinar on generational dynamics, Ms. Kulani Shiluvane. Kulani is the founder and chief solutionist at Shiluvane, a human resource and labor law consultancy that she established in 2017. With a wealth of experience in operations, HR, and labor law, Kulani brings a unique perspective, I think, to the table. Before founding Shiluvane, Kulani served as the COO at a medium-sized enterprise in Johannesburg, where she honed her skills in business operations and people management. And today Kulani will share her invaluable insights on the complexities of generational dynamics. I thought very long and hard about inserting a joke about my teenage son, and when he's talking to his friends, me not understanding a word he's saying, probably thinking he's from a different planet, but better judgment prevented me from doing that. Her practical experience and innovative approach promises to deliver actionable strategies for creating healthier, more productive work environments. So welcome, Kulani, and thanks very much for your time this afternoon. I'd also like once again to introduce today's facilitator, Mr. Brad Wattridge. With over 27 years in the business sector, Brad is driven by a fundamental question, which is, what does success truly mean? His journey has led him to explore diverse success stories across Southern Africa with a focus on business-to-business relationships and empowering SMMEs. As a published co-author and senior partner of a group of companies, Brad shares invaluable insights on business growth and personal development, and his philosophy is rooted in hard work, integrity, and living one's greatness. So welcome to you both, and thanks very, very much for your time. We really do appreciate it. If I may, then, Brad, with no sort of further ado, can I hand over to you to get us started?
Yeah, absolutely, Gordon. Thank you so much. So now that the formalities are out the way, we have to share a secret, guys. Kulani and I know each other really, really well, and we tend to have a lot of fun during our sessions. And I know that we come from a very serious industry, but we do want to spend the next hour really sharing insights. So Charmaine, Jane, Dora, whoever's on this session or in this session, if you want to comment, please feel free to pop a comment through, raise your hand, maybe even talk a little bit, share your insights. The concept that we are specialists or we are professionals and we are giving out information is not going to work in this session. We're here just to share our perspective on the industry. I mean, we are playing in an employer's space. So a lot of what you guys are hearing might not be new, but I think Kulani's approach is really different, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun on it. So I have shared screen, and I am going to hand over to Kulani to start off. But guys, this is very conversational, so please feel free to raise your hand when you want. We will unmute you. You can have a nice chat, share a comment, post a comment, but please don't sit in silence or go off and make coffee or watch Bridgerton. So Kulani, I've started watching Bridgerton.
Really? Okay.
I'm not going to make it, eh?
Okay.
I'm past episode 3. I don't think I can do it, eh? Too much politics in the workplace, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hit it, Kulani. You want to start us off?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brad and Gordon. Thank you so much for the introduction, ladies and gentlemen. Hello. I hope everybody is well. I'm not going to say Happy New Year because it is the 5th, it's the 21st. It was a Happy New Year on the 1st, and we're done with all of that. Brad, if we could just move to the next slide. And as Brad said, nothing I'm going to say today is going to be rocket science. The people sitting in this room probably understand the dynamics that we're talking about, but it's how I deal with them in the work that we do at Shiluvane, dealing with different clients from different backgrounds of different sizes that I think is going to be the conversational starter here, right? So generational dynamics refers to literally how the different generations that we find in the workplace sort of like interact with one another, the challenges that, people like myself as people practitioners have to face in terms of dealing with those particular nuances, but also people managers, the team leaders, the supervisors, all those people. It's about the challenges that, different generations come as they come of age, what they bring to the workplace and how we deal with that. But the most important thing is how we deal with it in a way that enables the workplace to function and to thrive, but not only, the workplace and its own, but the individual as well. The world of work has changed drastically pre the spicy flu, post the spicy flu, and post the spicy flu, which is the C word that I'm not going to mention, by the way, because it was a difficult. No.
We're not sure what's happening in China. Like, can we please? We have enough stress. Enough stress. Yeah.
100%. 100%. Yeah. So, Brad, if we could just move on to the next slide, please.
Oops.
Just the one before that. Okay, perfect. So the generational overview and the key characteristics that we all probably know. Baby boomers. This is my mom. They are loyal. They value the job. They prefer face-to-face. The impact that they bring into the workplace, they tend to stay in a job for a very long time. These people are the ones that are getting the, awards for being in the workplace for 30 years. Could never be me, thank goodness, because why am I seeing the same people for 30 years? Goodness, no thanks.
Or the other way around, maybe.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Can I stop you there in between? Sorry, I just want to jump in here because I think the guys, under baby boomers generation, millennials, Gen Z, they kind of know this. They work with these guys on a daily basis.
Yeah.
What I want to ask, the question I've been dying to ask for so long now is, we hear a lot about this in the States. We hear a lot about the woke movement. We hear a lot about all these dynamics that are happening in the US, but locally at home, is there an issue between these generations? Are you picking this up in your consultation across the different industries you're working on?
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, as early as yesterday, I had to facilitate a conversation between, and this is not even a big generational gap. This is between a millennial and a Gen Z. One of our clients, they are in the technology space. The founder of that particular business is a millennial like myself, and is finding it very difficult to engage with his Gen Z employees. So we actually sat around a boardroom table yesterday, and he said to me, Kulani, how do I practically engage with this generation? Because I'm finding it very, very difficult. The values that I bring into the workplace is not the values that they bring into the workplace, and we are having a bit of a clash. So it is something that we see locally as well, that we are having differences, with sort of like engagement, interaction, team cohesion, team dynamics. So it is definitely a thing that we're having to deal with and that we see in the local space as well.
And just building on that, do you feel that, or from your experience, and I'm not sure if anybody else in the room has had experiences, I'm sure you guys come across this on a daily basis, and it's so nice for us to chat about the solutions we've come up with to help deal with it, because I don't think it goes away. If Nicole was asking for a case study, and I was thinking about it last night, and we spoke about, just using myself as a case study. My dad is still in the workplace. I'm in the workplace, and my eldest is now in the workplace. And when we sit around a dinner table,
how old are you, Brad?
How old is my dad? So when we sit around Kulani, when we sit around our dinner together and we talk through our trials and tribulations in the workspace, we all have such a variety of feedback and way we approach it. So I don't think it's something that's going to go away, but a person working in an employer's organization, up and above the labor laws and all these things that we have to deal with in this country, we have to pay attention to this. I'm sure, because I think this plays a huge, huge role in conflict.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, I think for me, I'm not going to say I've nailed it, right? But the one thing that I have seen works quite well is that instead of focusing on the differences at the end of the day, we're all human beings. Find the common thread that threads through all of these people. And that's how you are going to get people to be able to relate to one another, see things from each other's perspective. Sorry, my laptop does this thing where it puts up emojis when I talk with my hands. And for somebody who talks with their hands, there's a lot that might come up. So I hope nobody's easily distracted. So it's about finding a common thread that runs through all of these generational differences, different generational dynamics, because at the end of the day, there are things that make us one people, be it a value system, be it the buy-in in terms of what we're trying to achieve as an organization. The one thing that Gen Zs do very, very well is to bring an impact into the workspace that we don't really nearly think about, right? Is the work that I am doing on a day-to-day basis actually having a positive effect in the world? Is it having a positive effect on me as an individual? And is it having a positive effect in the world, the world in general, right? Whereas me as a millennial, like, had I been a good child and followed my parents' advice, I would have been an accountant, I would have built a career, and I would probably be, working in a bank somewhere, because that's how we were sort of like entered into the workplace, how we were socialized into the workplace, right? And then for the older generation, it was about finding a job, but a job that would allow you to live the kind of life that you want to live with your family. It was about providing for your family. It was about, ensuring that your family is secure economically as well. But more importantly, the job was more about ensuring that the family dynamic, is taken care of. Whereas it's very different for, the generations that follow. So your dad is probably sitting around the dinner table and saying to his granddaughter, keep the main thing, whereas your daughter is probably saying to her granddad, but I'm not sure that the work that I'm doing is having a positive impact on me personally, etc., etc. Yeah.
And I think it's not just the baby boomers against the millennials, the Gen Zs against the millennials. I think it's also the culture that comes into our workplace, especially where we stay in the country we live in. We have such an amazing acceptance across different cultures, but it does get frustrating. For me, something that is intertwined into my culture is being on time.
Yeah.
Now, I've got to still fight with, let's say, for example, a Gen Z where time is probably not of the essence. And for me, it's really, really important to get this thing done by time. But I also might be dealing with somebody who has a different approach from a cultural perspective. Like, what would you suggest I do that I don't completely lose my cool? And did you know that the male version of Karen is Brad? Did you know that? I forgot to tell you the other day. It's Brad. So how do I not become a Brad? And like, help me there with that. Especially if I'm placing other people and I'm dealing with all these personalities in the workspace. And we're in this small industry. It's high stress. It's not really fun generally all the time. I just want to get my stuff done and go home. And I've got this person coming in and kind of being a little bit gray.
Yeah. I think, and especially in the South African context or the African context, where time is a pure suggestion, I know at a family function, if I want people to show up on time, if the event starts at 3, I'm telling them it starts at 12 because, it's an actual thing. So it's about, and it's, the way you get people to sort of like understand where you're coming from is making them understand how what they're doing is actually impacting you, right? It's understanding that time is a value concept for you. So what does time mean? It's not only about the fact that the meeting starts at 12, but it means I'm able to get this meeting done and I see to other things as well. But it's about making sure that the person understands what the concept of time actually means to you personally, and not just as it's one of those things that you have to do at work. I always say, for somebody who's overly punctual, sometimes to a fault, I always say, for me, and when I'm talking to people about the concept of time, I always say, you know what, I'm not going to get time back. I can make a lot of money and I can lose it and I can remake that money, but I only have a certain period of time on this earth before, I get cremated and my son enjoys all my money. So and that's what I always say to my team, and especially the younger ones on my team, because a lot of my team is actually Gen Z. I said, for me, it's important that we are on time because it's a valuable resource, because it's a resource you're never going to get back.
Yeah, because in essence, we're all selling time.
100%.
I mean, even
100%.
if we're producing a product, it's the time span of that product. But within this space and this association, I would imagine, I'm not sure if I'm right, Jane, Charmaine, Angie, around the fact that we're selling time. Our time is really, really valuable, and each generation has a different perspective. So
Yeah.
does this mean that negotiations and constant communication is a thing? Because, our generation, we don't do that. We talk once, ne?
Yeah.
So that's going to fall away. So these quick get-togethers and just touching base on where we are and making sure we understand the fundamentals is really important, right?
100%. And this is something that we practice at a performance management level, right? One of the fights that I always get into with clients, and especially when around sort of like performance appraisals and things like that, is that communication needs to be constant, and it needs to be clear, and it needs to be simple, right? So we need to be constantly communicating. As I say to people, when you're sitting down for a formal appraisal with anybody within your organization, what you're discussing in that appraisal should not be, it shouldn't be new, because we're having to talk about certain things all the time. It's continuous feedback. So after
it's that
project,
reiteration.
100%.
It's that constant revisiting and addressing that. So
Yeah.
I know we want to move on, and we're already 15 minutes in. Guys, if you do want to comment or share your experiences with us, it really, really helps us, because it gives us an opportunity to engage. So Kesh, if you do want to just unmute or raise your hand, Jane as well, and anybody else that's in the room, it'd be really great to have that engagement and interaction. So Kulani, the other thing that I want to talk about that kind of frustrates me a little bit, working through the different generations is there's this reality. I was reading this very interesting article. I think it was done in Daily Maverick, but they picked it up from an international publication where our generation will be in the workplace much longer.
Yeah.
Because we are not in the position to retire financially, the rising costs and that. And I think this is a global. Yeah, that's definitely going to impact the younger generations, because we kind of the diehard guys. We were the ones that were told to go and play when our parents were gutful, and we only had to come home when it was dark, and that's it. Right? I don't think you're my generation, but that's how we were.
No.
Not
and we
exactly
drank water from the hose pipe. I mean, if I were to say that to my son, he would probably look at me like, "You drank water from where? It wasn't filtered." Oh my God.
Yeah. And obviously it was different time, different access to different things. But in essence, we are not the best in relaying information to the younger generations. Do you think that constant communication should be integrated into our internal communication strategy in a company? How important does our internal marketing become? Even though, let's say we work in an employer's organization, there's two of us in the office, and we placing in a certain industry.
Yeah.
Even though it's just two of us, there might still be that breakdown. And even if we're working in a corporate where there's 500 of us in the corporate pool, in being employed, that internal communication is actually a great opportunity just to dispel any sort of issues that might be rising. What do you think on that?
I agree with you, Brad. And you know what the pity about communication and effective communication is that it's become such a buzz thing that we talk about so much that I'm sure there are people on this call that might be yawning just at the thought of what we're discussing right now. But as I always say, is that, cliches become cliches because they hold valuable truth. And that's what communication and being able to communicate effectively, understanding how communication runs within an organization, understanding how people receive communication is very, very important as well. My team knows if you want to relay a very important message to me, do not call me, because I'm going to be annoyed at the fact that my phone is ringing. Because why are you phoning me in a day and age where you can text me? But that's probably very different from my mom. My mom calls me at any slight inconvenience in her life because that's her chosen form of
Us too,
communication.
yeah. Yeah, the
So
call
it's
for
not,
us is important.
yeah. So it's
Mm.
not only about communicating that you need to sort of like, thread through your strategy as well, but how you communicate as well becomes very, very important as well. Because at the end of the day, I don't know, I played broken telephone as a kid. And the one thing that you've learned from that is that any kind of breakthrough in communication changes the messaging. And if the messaging is not, received from top to bottom and bottom up, and there's any miscommunication, it causes issues.
Yeah, I wonder why you guys are against the phone call. I get these messages from the team, can I call?
Oh
And I
yeah,
think, no, just
you
call,
do
just
not
pick up the
under
phone and phone me. Don't linger. Just get it done and out of the way. But then I also now understand that it causes a lot of misunderstanding
Mhm.
where, a written text could be something you can review and just check the tone and then you can move on from there.
Yeah.
But I kind of starting to see where the breakdowns could be. I think it's quite important for us to pay attention to that. So
Charmaine
the
says,
next
I agree
slide,
with your mom. Phone me, don't text.
Charmaine. Charmaine, what generation are you? You
If
sound
you
young.
don't
You
mind
seem
us
young.
asking,
Yeah, just asking. No age, just generation. I think that helps us.
you can tell
So
us.
yeah, so moving on. I know it's preoccupying with the discussion, but I'm sure you want to get through your presentation as well.
No, 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 definitely. But I think what I wanted to sort of like touch on in this particular slide is the reason why we're here in terms of how, do generational dynamics influence business, right? So conflict and synergy, how you handle this becomes quite important, right? Leadership and management expectations, what you expect from your manager, leadership, et cetera, is very different from what a Gen Z would expect from their manager. Transfer of knowledge and succession planning as well. I was sitting in a meeting last week as part of a women's business forum that I am part of. And this one lady said, I don't want to be one of those people that says, oh, this is how we used to do it. And I said to her,
Mm.
tell me how you used to do it, because there's value in the way that you used to do things that we can modernize to make things better right now. And that becomes very, very important, because I think there's also a situation where the now generation thinks they've got everything figured out. you know and the one thing I'm learning as a millennial, the more and more I sound like my mother as a parent, is that there were just certain things that they were right about. I mean, don't tell her I said that, because she doesn't need that information. But there's wisdom that comes from previous generations that we can adopt and use effectively even in the modern world right now. So those influences, those nuances become very, very important as well. Technology adoption and innovation. My mom, I wonder if she knows I actually use her as a reference so many times. My mom is a liker of things. I got her, when we all moved over from Blackberry. Hi.
Yeah.
No, it's just a random.
Oh, okay. I thought somebody was asking a question.
No, it's all cool.
So we're talking about technology and adoption of innovation. When everybody moved over from BlackBerry to iPhone, my mom, being the liker of things that she is, got her an iPhone. That woman only uses it to call me. She barely texts. I don't even think she really understands what she can do with it. But it's important, and as frustrating as it might be, to actually sit with her and sort of let her understand, because knowledge transfer can happen backwards as well, whereas we, the people who understand technology a lot better, can transfer it back to those, as don't kill me anybody, those that were born before technology. But anyway, and
You know
then
that technology has existed for quite a while, Kulani. Technology is not just an iPhone, right? We had the fax machine, color photocopier. Don't laugh. Seriously, I remember faxing. I do.
I remember faxing, but does your daughter know what a fax machine even looks
They
like?
don't even know. Do you know she doesn't even know to tell the time on a, I don't know what you call the normal
An
clock.
analog clock. It has to be digital.
It has to be digital.
Yeah.
It's a
So
thing, apparently.
I was watching a TikTok. It's a guilty pleasure. Don't judge me. And this young lady said, "What if we had a phone in the house that everybody could use as and when they need it?" And this guy was like, "That's called a landline." These kids have no idea what a landline is.
So when we're in an organization situation and we've got these youngsters coming in, it can actually be a transfer of knowledge both ways.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get stuck on that because as someone who's more senior,
Yeah.
you feel it's your obligation to transfer the knowledge onto the juniors coming in.
100%.
But the juniors can actually teach us one or two things who, you know, where we can communicate more efficiently, we can work more efficiently. But I think what I'm picking up is, yeah, the technology is moving at such a fast pace that our colleague might not even be human.
What do you mean your colleague might not be human?
So with AI, we might have, let's say, for example, in our industry, copywriting is now being dominated by AI tools. So where you would sit around a table and construct your copy, let's say it's you're producing a piece or whatever it is, you know, the chances of you introducing an AI tool into that conversation is quite high.
100%. But
do you think that's gonna help, or do you think that's gonna really push us over the edge between generations?
I think you know what, I'm optimistic. I think it's going to sort of like help. It's just about understanding how we introduce AI and all this new technology to, you know, to the older generation as well. But you know, coming back to your point where you're talking about copywriting and how, you know, there's always going to be a conversation around AI. My point, you know, when I'm having this discussion where everybody's like, yeah, you know, AI and machinery is going to, you know, take over the world, it's still going to need humans, because I can guarantee you right now, the copy that an AI might produce is not going to go out as that. There's still going to be a human touch to it, because at the end of the day, AI is a human invention.
Yeah, and it's been constructed by a human of a certain generation. So that's 100%. Also going to be an interesting dynamic, except if you're Mohali City. If you're Mohali City and you work in the PR department, AI does your press releases. Just putting it out there, not blaming or throwing shade on anyone, just saying hashtag. But technology adoption is quite tricky. So for example, with my dad, you know, my dad is still working because he's one of few who can operate the system. And it's a highly evolved AI integrated system that he's actually pretty much grown up with. But he can't get himself into the building with his card.
His access card.
Because he's got to do something with his access card because it's a smart building. So you come in, the prompter prompts you to a desk, you get to the desk, your entire stuff has been downloaded onto that system at that desk, and he can't get that right. But yet he's one of maybe 5 worldwide that can operate this AI integrated system. So sometimes we perceive somebody open to technology by maybe the phone they have, or maybe the way they use WhatsApp. But technology adoption needs to be explained step by step through our internal comms process. And I think it's going back to basics. How do we greet each other? I know for me, it's very important to greet in the morning and greet in the afternoon. My team has helped me get to the point where I can just greet in the morning and I'm okay with that. You know, because greeting for them, the younger generation, is not so big because they're talking all the time. Yeah, it's optional. It's an optional extra. So, you know, there's lots of things that, and I am quite advanced with AI tools in terms of my skill set. So I think we mustn't jump to the conclusion that just because we're a certain age, just because
Yeah.
we're a certain generation, that we actually understand the impact of technology on ourselves and our fellow generationals next to us. And I think that's the important point. Don't presume anything. Ask the person. Are you happy with
100%.
how I'm communicating with you? I see you're not responding immediately. You're taking a day to respond. That doesn't sit well with me. I have a philosophy of a 2-hour response. You have a
Mm.
philosophy of a 3-day when you feel like response. So how do we find?
You know, this also comes up a lot in the workplace, not only in terms of like responses, but also productivity times, right? And you know, responding to emails, responding to client needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As somebody who is wide awake and ready to go first thing in the morning and then has a daily slump, um, in the afternoon, my team knows that they're going to get the best out of me first thing in the morning. Afternoon, like
Me
literally
too.
from
Yeah.
like don't talk to me, and then it picks up again after dinner, when my son has sort of like had dinner and is about to go to bed, and then I can sort of like work again until like 10
Mm.
o'clock, because I have a bedtime at my big age, because apparently it's a good thing. So
Mm.
it's understanding those nuances. And again, I love what you said, Brad. Don't take things for granted, and be open. This is what I always say to all generations. Be open to something that does not feel familiar, that does not feel like you are part of it. Because the moment you stay open is when you're able to innovate, you're able to learn, you're able to
Mm.
gain a skill set that you would have otherwise not had if you had remained closed, right?
Mm.
I know that Gen Zs hate the thumbs, the sharp emoji, right? So just so to ease their anxiety now, I just send them a fist bump because I know they're irritated. But when I send you a thumbs up, I know that that I'm like, okay, cool, that works.
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
for
yeah,
them, it's like, oh my God, you're swearing at me. And they
yeah.
don't do the heart like this, like my
Oh, I
people
did
do
that
the
the other
heart.
day.
They
Yeah,
do the heart like, oh, I can't even do it.
yeah, yeah.
So it's
So
about staying open.
what is the boundary? And,
Hmm.
Nicole mentioned boundaries, but I think it's from a different perspective. So maybe Nicole can unmute and just give us insight into that. But
Yeah.
when do you stop entertaining? And I'm going to be a typical person of my generation and say the nonsense. I know it's not nonsense.
Yeah.
Where's the boundary? Because we let in these different elements. We consider it. We open. We acknowledge that there's not only just different generations, but different
Hmm.
cultures,
Hmm.
different language barriers, etc.,
Hmm.
etc. Where do we draw the line when it becomes a company policy that people must adhere to, and it's not
That's
under
exactly it.
discussion? How do
That's
you get to
exactly
that
it.
point?
It's about understanding the environment that you are in, right?
Okay.
And that
Yeah.
is the boundary. At the end of the day, whether you are a baby boomer or a Gen Z, you are in a workplace, and that workplace has certain boundaries. There's certain things in place that allow it to function in a way that it functions, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Culturally, from a culture perspective, processes, policies, etc., etc., etc. And that is the boundary. And we cannot go if I cannot I cannot say to a client, oh, sir, ma'am, listen, we work, from half past. Okay, bad example. An individual can't come to work and say, no, I'm just going to work, from 2 to 3. I mean, I'm sure you can, but they're working hours, and that's the
Mm.
boundary. And we might be able to shift the boundary if there's special needs that need to be moved. But at the end of the day, that is the boundary. And if we expect you to be at work at a certain time, be at work at a certain time. And that is the boundary. If there are special circumstances where we need to shift the boundary, that boundary can be shifted temporarily. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Angie just popped a comment now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. Angie was saying, I don't think it's about the text or phone issue. I think it's about finding you anywhere at any time and now using any platform to do so. I'm guilty of this too, as it become normal just to text someone and expect there should be a response. For example, I sent an email to someone just the other day regarding a work matter and they decided to respond to me on WhatsApp. Why? Yeah, it's what you feel comfortable with and where you are standing from a confidence perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it also, Angie raises a very, very valid point that it's like, and it goes back to exactly what I'm saying right now. Angie could have written back and said, listen, I appreciate the response on WhatsApp, but at the end of the day, this is a work matter. I've written to you on email. Could you please respond to me via email? But we have so many, and I'm guilty of this as well. We have so many tools and platforms where we can communicate with people. Personally, I hate the green app. If I didn't run my own business, and if I didn't have family and friends that I mildly care about, I would delete that green app, if that makes sense, right? Because I would rather
Yeah.
just text you like normal SMS texts, because WhatsApp just is so invasive. You can find people at any time, at any point, but it's about, again, those boundaries that we set, understanding what the communication style is within the organization, and just following, whether we like it or not, following what the rules and the regulations say at the end of the day, because those things are not, certain things are not generational, guys. If you put your hand on a hot stove, you're going to get burnt, whether you are 2 years old, 69, or
Yeah,
52.
yeah, yeah.
They just
But
certain things that are in
Kulani,
place. Yeah.
how do we, as employers, as working within the organization,
Mhm.
how do we drive the message that there are rules in place for a reason? Let's say, for example, we're dealing with the latest generation to come into the workplace, which is all about me. How
Yeah.
do we drive that? Is it just a very strong mailer that goes out to them? Do we need to
Mhm.
find out what platform they resonate? Do we need to open an Instagram account and do a whole Insta grid around why it is important to be at work at 8:30? Because
Yeah.
this is the reasoning behind it. Do you think we're not educating or communicating enough on why we do what we do?
I think it's how you're communicating. And in the sense that at the end of the day, you need to, so what we tend to do when we're communicating with people is, and especially when we are on different sides of the pole on a certain matter, right? We just tend to throw disagreements to one another instead of saying, instead of coming to the party and saying to this person, the reason why this is such and such is because of X, Y, and Z. It's not, the one thing, the worst thing you can do with General Z is just say, oh, that's just the way it's been done. Because they're going to be like, and so what? It's been done that way. And then what? Where do I
Hmm.
enter, as they would say? Whereas to say, the reason why we do X, Y, and Z is because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, in my particular organization, we work very flexible hours, right, at the end of the day. And we had an older lady join the team, and it really frustrated her that the younger people were not necessarily at work on time. We start work at
Hmm.
8:30, maybe they're shifting in at like 7:45, quarter to 9, 9 o'clock. And this used to bug her. And I said to her, at the end of the day, um, for us, working hours are a suggestion, because at the end of the day, whether you are doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning or at 8:30 in the morning, I just want my work delivered. Because for me, the most important part is not keeping tabs on you in terms of, whether you're working, you're at work and sitting at your
Hmm.
desk at 8:30. It's whether you're delivering good quality work to our
Fair enough.
clients. You
But
know,
does it get delivered? Does
oh
the
yeah,
work get
oh,
delivered, Kalani?
oh,
I
I'm
mean, let's
now.
be honest. You
Yeah.
have these flexi hours and this concept of, I don't think it works maybe in the SAEFA industry, but
Oh,
even
probably not.
in our industry, it's, work, just as long as you put the hours in, you're working. I know I'm quite privileged with my team as they
Yeah.
always deliver, but
Yeah.
um, does it work or should we be putting in those structures and communicating those structures and the why behind them?
You should be putting in the structures and the why behind them, but the why is important, but the buy-in of the why is even more important,
I
because you
see
can
what you're
have
saying.
the
Yeah,
why,
yeah,
but
yeah.
the reasoning behind the why becomes very, very important as well. And I can understand that in this particular in this particular industry, why it might not work, and it would work, in a consulting company like you and I have, because at the end of the day, they deliver. And if they don't deliver, there's consequences to non-delivery. The same way, if you are working in a factory and you are late, there's consequences to you being late, because obviously you being late impacts your delivery. Whereas if somebody's late at Shiluvane by 30 minutes, it really does not impact their delivery of the work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So I kind of get the idea that how we communicate the rules and regulations becomes really important. And I kind of agree with Angie on, if I mail you, I really would like a mail back.
100%.
Because if I'm expecting a mail back, because that just makes sense to me, it's on that platform.
Yeah.
But it becomes tricky when we have different platforms that all kind of integrate. So we have WhatsApp, and then we have a mailing system, and then this happens, and now you can put emojis on your mailing system, so it becomes very chatified. It becomes very difficult to kind of draw those boundaries, especially with WhatsApp. But just an interesting thing that I noted, the US relies still a lot on texting, and I think it's because of their data rates are just so affordable.
So
Where
only
we
thing they're getting right.
Yeah, where we rely a lot on WhatsApp, which is, data driven, or their phone call rates. But yeah, it's just interesting that it's not only the generational elements within our space as South Africans, but it's also every single country has different culture that it brings to the table, and it just becomes so complex. So just to simplify, when we move into the next slide, if there's one thing I had to do other than just show up for work, would it be to be aware of the fact that it's not just my generation?
Oh, 100%. 100%. You need to understand the specific nuances of your particular workplace, right? I'm going to use an example that I think probably a lot of people on this call are very, very familiar with. This was a very famous case in the labor court. There was a gentleman, works at Toyota, says to his boss, Brad, I am going to take family responsibility leave. My small father, Babngani in Zulu, has passed away, right? And then they realize, so because the word has father in it, they thought that it was his father had died, but it wasn't the father, it was his father's younger brother. And this guy was taken through a whole disciplinary hearing, because apparently he was abusing leave, etc., etc., etc. And the court came back and said, listen, there's specific nuances in South African culture that you need to understand. And also, this guy did say that he was going to his Bamngani's funeral, not his Baba's funeral. And in South African culture, in Black African culture, my father's younger brother, all my father's brothers are my dad's. And we and because of the way in which we are raised, etc., you would find that this man's small uncle, small dad, direct translation, maybe raised him, etc., 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 etc. So understanding particular nuances, cultural differences, not even generational differences only. We were talking about we were talking on, a little bit before we start the call, how I had to learn to look people of authority in the eye, because as a girl growing up in Limpopo, I was taught never to look at old people in the eye. It's a sign of disrespect when you're speaking to them or you're being spoken to. But in corporate South Africa, if I don't look you in the eye, I look shady. I look like, it's the body language is off, if that makes sense. So understanding the fact that it's not only generational differences, but cultural nuances, socialization, agency, and all of those things become very, very important.
And I think it's actually in a way kind of sad. Maybe it makes more work for us at the end of the day. But if you look at the Japanese cultures, they've really incorporated their culture quite strongly into their work environment.
Yeah.
Specifically a way who enters a room first, who sits down first, how you greet each other, etc. And we've kind of have a very Western approach to our corporate environment. So that also kind of adds to the situation of perhaps misunderstanding and presuming that everyone understands, the status quo at that particular point. But Anela had quite a nice comment. She just said her 2 cents responding to me is that, people have a contract.
Yeah.
And that contract outlines the rules and regulations and working hours, and people sign that contract, they should adhere to it. But if only it was that simple, right?
Yeah.
People sign contracts they don't understand. Do you come across that?
Yeah.
Language barriers, understanding cultures, etc. Yeah, I'm signing this, I'm happy to have a job, but I don't really understand what my rights are.
And that's why it becomes very, very important to sit with people, and especially if there's a language barrier. And this is why I'm such a big advocate for, and I get the fact that it's very difficult in the South African context. We do have 13 official languages, but I'm a big advocate of sitting with people, and especially if English is not their first language, to actually sit and explain things to people in a way that they understand, so they understand what they are signing up to. I agree with Anele. If you know what you are signing up for, you need to be held accountable for exactly what you've signed up for. But are we taking the time to sit and properly onboard people, and socialize them into the workplace so they fully understand? And what we tend to see is that we say, okay, here's your employment contract, here's your handbook, here's, it's got all the policies and procedures, here's a little outline, here's a online little work thingy, go through the policies, tick, 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 and then we assume that you understand everything. But let's put a human touch to it as well, to actually make sure that we are ensuring that people fully understand what it is that they are signing up for. But I'm a big fan of accountability. People do need to be held accountable for what they have signed up for and what they understand that they've signed up for. So yeah, I mean, I like to think that my client, I fight with my clients quite a bit sometimes, where they're like, no, I think you are being a little too lenient, etc., etc. And then sometimes they fight me where they're like, no, but I think we need to give them a second chance. And I'm like, but you're creating a precedence, and then that's a precedence that I'm going to have to deal with, and we might have to deal with at the CCMA and at labor court level. So it's balance, if that makes sense.
And I also feel like a lot of new employees that come into the employment market will sign a contract with a misunderstanding that the CCMA will get them out of anything that they tend to do wrong. I think people run to the CCMA really a little bit too quickly and not actually understand the full impact that it has, because as an employer, or even working in an employer agency, that's your time, which is so valuable. We spoke about it right in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think if people do come into a situation and their contract is explained to them in a language and in a way that they understand, considering their age group and how receptive they are in certain situations, I think could be valuable down the line, because it could help prevent any potential issues coming up.
Yeah.
And you would look good as an employer, I think, if you did that. I'm not sure if they'll give you brownie points on any level, but from just a mindset and a holistic perspective, it could be quite positive.
100%. And also, I agree with you. I think a lot of people just think, a lot of employees think that the CCMA is their saving grace. But I think it's important for employees to also understand that the CCMA is also for the employer. And especially if, as an employee, you're not doing what you're meant to be doing, and you're not showing up, you're not holding up your end of the bargain, right? I think people tend to forget that, legislation, the Labor Relations Act, the basic conditions of employment come from the Constitution, and the Constitution says that both the employer and both employer and employee have rights. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, and this is a personal thing, and I hope this is not putting a gray smudge on the session, is I just think that as an employer, if you're taken to the CCMA and you do win and it is ruled in your favor, whether it's at arbitration or wherever in court, I think the problem is the time that it's wasted and the effort that you have to put in and the legal advice you have to get. You can't recoup that from the employee. You can try, but it just won't happen. So I do think that, at contract level, when you're bringing somebody into an organization, just be very cognizant of what generation they are, where they are, and how they like to be communicated to, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think, the one thing that we do with our clients is that from a contractual perspective, is that we like to mediate issues before issues are referred to the CCMA. And that's not to say that once an issue has been mediated and maybe parties are not happy, that they cannot go to the CCMA, but a big, big fan of mediation. I see there's a few comments in the chat. It says,
It's Donnie. Yeah, it's a funny one. Yeah, so you want to hit the first one?
it says the CCMA being the saving grace. My personal opinion is that a lot of employers would rather settle, and this creates the idea that employees will always get something. 100%. Sometimes I always say to my clients, guys, let's go fight. Because me, I'm a fighter sometimes, and it's more. Brad, don't tell them. But only sometimes am I a fighter, because at the end of the day, you must be willing to stand up for the actual principle of it. Because if you just keep paying, employees are saying, okay, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna mess around, and then, she's gonna pay me, and then I'm gonna move on and go find employment elsewhere. And then
so Donnie's into Morse code, if anybody wants Morse code messaging. And also, I think Donnie's saying that Angie would love WhatsApps from you guys. So please send Angie as many WhatsApps as you possibly can. So I think everyone's read through the last slide. We're kind of running out of time.
Sure.
And I just want to spend a few minutes just, how do people get a hold of you? So you consult, you come in, even though if, let's say, for example, Aneli is a HR specialist, but is looking for an external consultant for specific matters, that's your plugin, right? That's your specialization.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. We support internal HR. We are HR for people that don't have HR. We help in both. We deal a lot more with employers than employees, where we sort of like help them sort of like understand, like if they have a CCMA case, how to prep for that. So we do a lot of that kind of consulting work as well.
Yeah. So, Kulani is part of a organization that we all belong to, where we work on some of the major corporate brands with their corporate social investment, and we go out and we support SMMEs with advice and guidance. And obviously, Kulani does it on an HR space. Mine is more marketing, communications, and sales. So I've known Kulani for some time, and you are a fighter, though. I know you are, ne? Yeah. So, we did this podcast to get together, Kulani. Have you found your man with the Prada shoes and the Range Rover?
Guys, I'm still looking. Anybody on the call with an uncle, brother, drives a Bentley, can afford Prada shoes. We don't want to be George with the Gucci shoes, but Prada.
Prada has to be Prada. So in closing, we've got 9 minutes left, and we're talking around the generational gap, and we've kind of understood that we can pick it up. We can physically see the different generations, and even in a Braai situation, we can see Granny doesn't know her phone very well, and the youngsters are always on their phones. And but in the workplace, we tend to switch that off. We tend to think that everybody's on the same level. We all workers here. Get your crap together, know what's on your contract, just be professional. But everybody's terms of professionality is different to somebody else's. And it's based on maybe their age group, but also on their culture. And I think if we can be a little bit more observant around that, it might help us not get so frustrated.
100%.
Because it's the frustration that creates the problems, right?
100%. One piece of advice I always give to other HR personnel, but also most importantly, people managers, right, is get to know your people. get to know them as a team and that particular dynamic, and without being the weird, nosy person, get to know them at an individual level as well. Because when you understand that dynamic, when you understand those nuances, then you are able to maneuver in a way that allows you to get the best out of your people, right? There's a question here. Nicole says, what's an effective way to collaborate and merge the alternative perspectives on an application level? Nicole, do you want to come off mute and maybe sort of like talk me through your comment?
For sure. Thanks so much, Kulani.
Sure.
Real quick, I just wanted to know in terms of, I'm just reading through the slides in terms of the rich pool of perspectives, the skill set, and so on. So just to sort of put all of that into one notion, when you have to apply or execute all these different sort of factors that come into play for the different generations, what would you say is an effective way to at least start sort of merging in the culture at work, whether it's from a production or just office culture?
You know, the one thing that we do very well is information sharing sessions where, you know, depending on the organization, what the organization does and what is important to that particular organization, where people are allowed to sort of information share. They're able to, you know, share perspectives, share skills, transfer skills, broaden each other's skill sets as well, you know, and doing it in a way that sort of like appeals to each and every generation. Again, it just goes back to what I said a little bit earlier, finding that common thread that runs through the, you know, the different generations, cultures, etc., 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 and using that to your advantage is probably the best way to do that. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Just one more question, sorry guys. I just
Sure.
wanted to check, and this is merely from a millennial, so I think I just want to also offer an alternative perspective to the conversation, a real life example, if you will. I know mental wellness, I think just before COVID has become such a big thing. So I think in my experience, or my peers' experience, we often sort of have the notion that baby boomers, for example, don't prioritize that. So with regards to having a contract, but also realizing that sometimes life do be lifing, right?
Life, say.
So how do you sort of navigate that whole perspective of mental wellness, and at an age that is so digital where we can just jump onto TikTok and sort of express how our work is suppressing or oppressing us, and then that's just one side of the story, but still gets the attention that it does. So how would you navigate that with the different generational gaps, but also sort of keeping it close to productivity?
I mean, I'm a big mental health advocate. We do a lot of work around mental health in the workspace as well. Typical millennial, I suppose, approach. But I think, you know, it's presenting a topic in a way and in a manner that speaks to that particular generation, right? You raise mental wellness to a millennial or a Gen Z, and it's something that we're familiar with. It's something that we're comfortable discussing. But for the older generation, it might not be, because there's so many misinformation. People got judged, etc., etc. So it's about presenting topics in a way that is accessible and is informative to the next person. That becomes a thing. And mental health has become a buzzword, Nicole. You're very, very right. But it's also understanding the negative aspect as well, because what we're seeing as well, which is so unfortunate, is that we're seeing people weaponize their mental health in the workspace as well. So, but at the end of the day, it's about having the conversations in a way that allows people to open up, and in a way that it makes sense to them. Approach them at their point of being, point of need, if that makes sense.
Cool. Nicole says, thanks so much. So we've got 3 minutes left, and I think I'm going to use that to say thank you, Kulani, so much for your time. It's always nice to share a screen or a stage with you, and just get your insights. We really appreciate it. I'm sure the guys in the groups, the guys that commented, thank you very much for commenting.
Yeah.
And for those that just listened in, we really appreciate your time. It's a whole hour out of your day. So we do get that this is really great, and we haven't really lost anyone in the session, so we really appreciate that. I have shared Kulani's handle for LinkedIn. Please engage. Kulani shares a lot of content around her specialization, and I think it's absolutely amazing stuff. So I follow Kulani and catch up and pick up on certain things and trends that are happening in South Africa that have helped me as a business owner. So yeah, that's my suggestion. And personally, just take a thank you. I think Gordon's going to talk through our next session, maybe. Hey, Gordon, or would you like me just to take the team through that?
Brad, if I could ask you to take the team through that.
Okay.
But before you do, can I just say thank you so much, guys. You know, it was fascinating for me. Sorry, I went off camera to sort of save bandwidth and so on, but was listening intently, and it was such an interesting interaction, because you know, you guys would be chatting, and I think, geez, you know, this is a point that I'd want to raise. And before I could even sort of, you know, raise my hand, etc., that you had moved on to that point and dealt with it and so on, so succinctly. So it was really a fascinating and I think very, very important topic. And you know, for me, the takeaway is definitely a case of saying, and Kulani, what you said was just be open to, you know, different perspectives, different backgrounds, different experiences, and so on. And the minute you do that, I think it changes the game for me. I've seen this in terms of what I've my interaction, where, you know, as soon as you're open to somebody else, perhaps just having a different perspective, you know, then you can do something about it, whether that's, you know, meeting them on their level, or whether it's, you know, sort of coaching them to understand, well, actually what you're doing is necessarily appropriate here, or whatever the case may be. So whatever way you can go, you can be dynamic from that perspective, just understanding, you know, where they're coming from. So that's I think the starting point, Joe.
Awesome.
But thanks very much, Brad. Maybe if I can hand over to you just to
yeah, we got a minute left. Again, time for me. So just quickly in a minute, the next session will be with a colleague of mine, Elmarie Goosen. Elmarie Goosen comes from the UK, believe it or not, with that surname. And she will be talking, Kulani also knows Elle very well.
I'm going to tell her.
Don't mention it. And Elmarie's going to be talking around mindset management. So how to integrate the mindset, keeping that active and positive, and also the skill and the ability to manage your team. And I think it's going to be a very, very, very interesting session. Nicole will share on your socials, on the LinkedIn page, the SAEFA LinkedIn page, when that's going to be, and all the details where you guys can sign up and join. So please join, please comment. Go back into LinkedIn now, go to the SAEFA page, please comment on the session. We really, really appreciate it, and we are so grateful for your attention throughout the session. Gordon, thank you very much, and if you guys are okay, I can end the session. We'll stay around for a little bit, but we can consider the session closed. If anybody wants to chat to us, we'll be in the room for the next 5 minutes, just chatting and waffling. If you want to ask a question, otherwise, thank you very much, guys. Thanks so much, Kulani.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. You know me, like to talk.
Yeah, but I think it's all relevant, and it brings up things that even I must pay attention to.
Yeah.
I think, Nicole, from your side, how did you experience it?
I have so many questions, just much like Gordon that was saying, the minute you have something and then we move on. I think I'm just processing it. The one thing that I was thinking about throughout the session was from a regulation, or rather from a law perspective. Again, I'm speaking from a millennial sort of point of view. Is there any sort of developing law that almost accommodates, I don't know if that's the best word to use, but almost accommodates the rise of all these different things? Because if you think about the nuances around you know, the LGBTIQ plus XR community, there's so many sort of sensitivities around that, you know. Again, but people that have access to social media will just go about and say how they're being disrespected because they are not being referred to as they, them, they, or however they wish to be referred to. So is there any sort of regulation with things changing that is sort of accommodating to that, to avoid those loopholes or the gray areas around those things?
There is. I mean, the Constitution, again, being the foundation of our law, you know, talks about how everybody's equal under South African law. We have very progressive law around, you know, gender equality, LGBTQ A+ rights, etc., etc. So all of those things, you know, are taken care of by this beautiful piece of legislation that I think we actually take for granted and don't engage with a lot. So and it's difficult, right? Because I'll share a personal story. My little sister was trying to figure out her sexuality, and my mom was losing her marbles because she was like, she was like, I understand somebody being gay, but I don't understand somebody being bi. And you know, I actually had to sort of like sit her down and have the conversation with her. And this is now my mom is 69 this year, almost 70-year-old, having to deal with something. Number one, as a Black parent, as a Christian parent, there's also all of those particular dynamics. But you know, the moment you are able to sort of like, it's about meeting. I realize that for me to bridge the gap between my mom and my sister is meeting my mom at her point of need, if that makes sense, right? It's, you know, one of the conversations I said to her, you know, the Bible says sin is sin. So whether I'm stealing, having an affair with an adultery or whatever, we all sin. So if this is sin, then so be it. We'll all be together, kind of situation. But it's about meeting the person at their point of need as well. And I realized, and it wasn't one conversation that I had to have with my mother. It was multiple conversations, you know, just to bridge the gap between the two, because my mom is a boomer, I'm the millennial, and my sister is a Gen Z. And it's just meeting those people at that point of need and having multiple conversations. Because at the end of the day, you can see that she just doesn't get it, and her socialization and making her realize that maybe the way she was socialized is not, you know, it's sort of, I don't want to use the word moving with the times, but sort of like understanding different generational dynamics, because this is her daughter who she loves. They have a great relationship, and you could tell that my mom really just wanted to understand what it was that my little sister was sort of like trying to communicate to her. Because also, I don't think, I mean, I told my mom I had a boyfriend when I was at 18, and I almost peed my pants, excuse my French. But my little sister's very open about who she's dating, etc., 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 etc. And my mom was like, "You were never like this." And I'm like, "Wow."
That you know of.
Yeah, I think you can't, the key takeaway for me, you can't have sort of one balance without the other, with the
100%.
cultural nuances and so on. So it's
100%.
definitely a very difficult thing to put into play. But thanks so much for the session. I for sure had a lot to process, and I will continue thinking about it.
No,
Perfect,
100%.
guys. So
Thanks, Nicole.
I'm going to do that rude thing they do in the bar when you stay too late and switch on the lights. And then you look so terrible because it's like 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. But I'm going to close the session completely, guys. And for those who hung around, thank you very much again for your time. You guys are amazing. And we'll see you in Feb. Kulani, we'll see each other soon somewhere.
Yeah, see you
Some
soon,
club
right?
somewhere.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate the time that everybody took out to listen to my nonsense.
Cheers, and take care.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Kulani. Thanks, Brad.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.